That's so funny. Yeah, I'm trying to think through. Um, I think, sorry, for most of my life growing up. So I'll say in a lot of ways, like growing up was awesome. Like the people, and this sort of coming to your point about like, or at least something you were gesturing towards around relationships. Like when people get to know you, it's like, yeah, you're a normal person, and a lot of times, and the research shows this too. Like the challenge comes when you don't have the opportunity to interact with people who are different from you, right? And you just see what you see on TV, or you hear stuff, or receive these stereotypes, and you're like, oh, I heard these people are like that, and that's the only data point you have. So I mean, I get how these biases are really crystallized and can become prejudice. And so like the people that I spent time with, like my friends at school, our neighbors, our teammates, like super tight, like it was, I mean, I'm trying to think if there was anything like that, like n- not within our friend circles. Like those were really trusted. But then it would be outside of that. And, there's all sorts of incidents and encounters where people would say stuff or not let us participate in things or deny us service or whatever. Like that would happen often too. But the interesting thing for me, throughout all of this is, um, one of my friends said this to me once, and it was like, I wasn't quite sure what to do. I don't write about this in the book, but it's like something that's always stuck with me. Um, and my friend said this thing to me once when we were having like a deep conversation. It was like, I kind of forget that you wear a turban sometimes. And like, when you're like used to being sensitive to anybody making any comment about you,
Yeah.
you're like ready to be offended. And I was like, I feel like he's saying something that's like slightly offensive, but I don't know why. Like,
Yeah.
why do I want him to see my turban? And then like, is he trying to say there's something deeper? And like, definitely, I think in these conversations where we whitewash difference when we're talking about diversity,
Hmm.
then I'm like, no, no, look at my turban. Like it
Yes.
matters to me. I want you to see me for who I am. But also, and this is what my friend was trying to say, like him forgetting my turban was almost like a way of saying, I think what he was trying to say was, I see you for who you are as a person. And like, that's an aspect of your identity, but like, I'm not focused on it in the way that other people are. And like, I'm just thinking about you as a friend and not like you as a category of like, oh, you're a Sikh or, oh, you're Punjabi or whatever it is that like people would associate with my turban. So like, I've been thinking about that a lot recently, where like trying to figure out what's the right balance of like honoring people's identities and differences and like particular experiences, and at the same time going back to the shared light that we were talking about, right? Like looking deeper and being like, and at the end of the day, you're a human being, and that's something we all share. So yeah, that's a tough one to square sometimes.
I love that because I think to me, like the important thing about that comment, that what I hear is that's context. Like if someone comes to you on the street, and the equivalent for me is like, right, and probably for you as well is, well, I don't see color. Like we go we go have a conversation, right? Like that comment's not okay. But in that concept of like a close friend and a deep conversation and understanding, like you had the relationship to understand the deeper meaning of what he's trying to get, but he may not have the words for. And that's the difference of having that connection with someone and them saying something that may not be the right way, someone like us who's been working on the field for a while would have said it, but being able to understand the meaning. And that's what I think for our listeners, if you say something wrong, understand that's not necessarily a reflection of who you are, but it might be a reflection of maybe you don't have the connection you think you do with those people for them to understand who you are, that you wouldn't make that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's totally, totally. No, I think that's so true. And like, of course, there are things you can say to your friends that you wouldn't say in public. Like that's always the case, right? And like, there's a level of trust and understanding, and like even what you're saying before, like I'll make jokes with my friends based on shared experiences that I don't think people, or I don't assume that people outside would get, right? Like outside of
Yeah.
our circle of trust. Um, But definitely there's this like deep desire I feel to be like, oh, this thing that my friend was able to see, like I understand why it's so hard for people, and he was able to get there, and now I want to like activate that around the world. Like what would it look like for us to be able to do that, where they know you for who you are and respect you for who you are, but also can go beyond that and really appreciate you for like the core of your being. And yeah, I think that's such a beautiful way to think about one another.
Well, I think that's a beautiful segue into our final question, which is when we look at society, when we look at kind of the world in general, what is the missing piece in diversity of inclusion or in the world? We know there's not one missing piece. A lot of times there are several, but what is the one piece of advice that you feel like is missing that you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, I mean, I would focus in on something that we've been talking about a lot, and the single word for it is empathy. Um, the ability to see other people for who they are rather than, and I think we're so bad at this, especially in the States. Like um, we see everyone through our own lens and through our own experience, and it leads so quickly to judgment. It leads so quickly to us saying like you're wrong and I'm right, or you haven't figured out how to do things in my way yet, and like let me come save you, right? Like this colonizing mindset. And um, I, I I think even in the context of DEI, where we're talking about how do you resolve racial inequities, which is super important. Like how do we talk about reparations? Super important. But one of the things that I feel like is missing in all of these conversations is that human element of care for one another, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
compassion for, and like what I talk to my kids about, and I think I try and bring this into my own life too, is like if you don't have that at the core of what you're doing, like it so easily crumbles
Mm-hmm.
because it's not sustainable. But if you do have that at the core of what you're doing, then that love will fuel everything, right? That'll solve the problems. And I think figuring out how to infuse empathy into the really important work that everyone is out there doing in trying to build this world. I just feel like it's crucial in order to actually get to the finish line there.
Simran, that was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I feel like that's such a mic drop moment. That was absolutely fantastic. But to close it out, where can people find you? What events do you have coming up? How can people get in touch?
Yeah, I'm everywhere. I'm like online too much. On most social media, I'm sick prof, SIKHPROF. On Twitter, I somehow managed to get my first name, which is a really popular South Asian first name, so I'm never giving that up. That's just Simran. Um, yeah, and then in terms of events, I'll be at South by again this year. I'll be in San Antonio for a big conference, and at the end of November, and that's I'm from there, so I'm going to be at pretty much all the Spurs games that are in town those 2 weeks. So come out to those Spurs game, come watch Wemby with me, come come cheer. Yeah, that's what I'll be up to.
Well, Simran, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you everyone for tuning in. Awesome. See you next time.